so you know, I am monitoring Q&A and chat. Caitlin's joining us today to go over our native plants. And I'm going to hand it over to her and let her get started real quick so that I can contact the people who have been manually emailing me for help. Caitlin, some notes for you. I will send you Q&As as I receive them, and so that everybody knows today we are recording today, so we'll be following up after the class. So thank you all, and again, I apologize. Caitlin, thank you for joining us on this wild day.
Absolutely. So I'm very excited. Natives are my favorite topic. Today I'm going to do a little bit with our shade natives, but Louie is going to be hosting a class at Fair Oaks, so it'll be a live class on the 30th. So I'll be pretty quick breezing through our shade natives, and then we'll focus on sun. And the way I'm going to break it down is by different types of gardens. So the first one that I'll show you is going to be for a shade or part sun location, part sun being 4 hours or less. And these are going to be plants for a more dry landscape. So the very first one, we all know I love a heuchera. Heucheras or coral bells are some of my favorites. I've got about 2 dozen at home because they come in a bazillion colors and varieties. This is a cultivar of Heuchera americana. So it's going to be drought resistant. Cultivar name is green spice. The reason for that is it has this really pretty nice red vein in the foliage. And as fall hits, which we want to focus today on summer and fall gardening, this is going to become even more red. It's also going to be fairly evergreen or semi-evergreen. So during the coldest months of winter, it's going to fade away, but they'll come back up in the spring. So heucheras or coral bells, they're great for fall foliage. Most often they're going to bloom in spring, and I'll see a lot of native pollinators, small sweat bees and native bees on them. But we do have a late blooming heuchera, and that's going to be Heuchera species villosa, excuse me. So this is a villosa. Cultivar name is Autumn Bride. The reason for that, it's very late blooming. They also get fairly large. They'll get about 2 feet, a little bit taller with their spikes. And these are drought resistant. They're very easy to establish, but most of the villosas are going to be less semi-evergreen than the other heucheras. So a beautiful late blooming coral bell that's going to provide nectar sources for our local bees. Now I've got another here. This is Lobelia syphilitica. So lobelia are great blue. Lobelias get to be about 4 feet tall. They will get these purple or light blue flowers to them, and they're a great nectar source for bees, butterflies, as well as hummingbirds. Now, Lobelia syphilitica tends to be a little bit more drought tolerant, but sun demanding than the straight Lobelia cardinalis. And I'll show you that in just a little bit. But the syphilitica is a great native plant that we can add that's going to support the wildlife in our yards. Again, it's going to want at least 4 hours of sun, and it's fairly tall, drought tolerant, but you don't want to let it go completely dry because it's so high up that it's going to be thirsty and need a decent amount of water. Just don't make it waterlogged. All right, now on to a rock star here. This is Aster diviricatus, or your white woods asters. So these are fabulous. They naturalize really well. They'll self-seed, but they're not crazy invasive or aggressive. And they're a late blooming aster with little white flowers. This one's just starting to show. You can see some of the buds are starting to open up. Again, we have a great nectar source, and they're also fairly short. So they'll stay around a foot tall. And when they're not in bloom, they're a wonderful, nice green matting that can act as a ground cover, but again, you're going to get these spikes, so in no way is it a steppable. But this is a fabulous native. You'll see them in the wild, and it's something that you can incorporate into your shade gardens at home. And unlike Lobelia syphilitica, this can grow in full shade. It will tolerate some sun. Often if you have it in a lot more sun, it's going to be a little more thirsty, especially the afternoon sun, and you will notice the leaves turning a little bit more purple as that happens. And let's see, now I'm going to show you Carex. So a lot of folks in Virginia, especially with the thick oak trees growing in their yard, have issues growing grass. We don't want to remove our oak trees because they support over 250 species. So if you're wanting to work with the landscape you have and still have a native natural environment, this is a great substitution for a lawn. This is Carex pensylvatica. It's got very fine leaves. It's not going to act as an evergreen, but it doesn't get much taller than 10 inches. And it will get these little spikes or inflorescence to it. That's usually in spring.
Caitlin, I may have missed this while I was getting emails sent out to folks, but sorry. Can you call out if you think of any as we're going? We're having requests for if stuff's deer resistant or if it's really good for containers. I know some of that may be too broad, but we're getting some requests for those kinds of notes to be added. I do want to add to everybody, Caitlin has some really great notes. I sent a message out, but we will be sending those out following the class. So if you're having trouble like with a spelling of a plant name or something, that's going to come out after the class. So yeah, thank you.
And the list just has a few little notes to it. This is like my third or fourth natives lecture that we've done. So I just kind of been making my outline breeze through, but then there's also a lot of really fun facts. For instance, 85% of the land east of Mississippi is privately owned. So it's up to us as private homeowners or even myself as a renter to incorporate natives, not just in our yards, but also our patios. So I'm here for it. I will mention as I point out the patio planters that natives as well as our native, especially native perennials, are going to have certain bloom periods. So you either want to stagger the blooms or really focus on a certain area where the pot's going to wow you. So most of our native containers, it's good to stagger because most things will bloom for maybe 4 to 8 weeks throughout the season. And then they're going to be going into seed and dormant during the winter months. And again, in containers, things are not going to be as hardy as they are in the ground, but I have had a lot of success overwintering plants, especially natives in containers, because this is the ideal environment for them. And also, yeah. So the last one I showed you, the Carex, oh, this is pensylvatica. I would not really incorporate a Carex into a pot unless it was solo, because the Carex can get a lot thicker and it's mounding. So it might be a little more aggressive for some of the other plants. I have incorporated the Aster diviricatus, the woodland aster, in containers, and it's done fabulous. And it's always nice because I can sit on my patio and watch the bees fly in and pay a visit. All right. Oh, and ferns. Ferns are awesome for containers. I can't get enough of my ferns, especially because most of us, when we're sitting out on our patios, it's usually a little bit more shaded. So we get a relief from the heat, especially in months like this in July where it's super hot. So ferns are great because they can keep us company in the nice, cool, shaded location. One of my favorites, and this is like, whoever asked that, this is perfect lead up. I have this plant right here. This is Anoclea sensibilis, or the sensitive fern. She is sensitive to cold temperatures, but she'll bounce back the next year. Outside of that cold sensitivity, she's not very sensitive at all. She's kind of a bully. She will spread very aggressively. You can see in this pot, it's just like wanting to bust out, doesn't even care. So I put one of these in a container so it didn't just take over my entire small shade garden. The container itself is probably about like 2.5 feet, and it's just the most lush, gorgeous container full of a sensitive fern, and I'm able to enjoy it without it destroying the garden. Now, one of the reasons I'm really gaga over this fern is they almost remind me of like Jurassic Park. They've got these really gorgeous fronds to them, and they almost have like a little bit of modeling in them. So one of my absolute favorites, if you have a large shaded space where you want something to just go gangbusters and spread, you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck with the sensitive fern. And if it's just something you want to enjoy in a container, I really encourage it because it is just one of my favorite pots I have on my patio. Now, another fern that I really enjoy is our lady ferns. Oh no, this is wrong. Pardon me, I grabbed a lady, she's on the other side. This is Densitatia. This is our hay-scented fern. So hay scented ferns, again, not going to be evergreen, but these are fabulous because like the sensitive fern, they will spread. They can also tolerate some sun. So if you have an area where you're like, okay, I want consistency, but one spot gets more shade than the other, this is a great fern that's going to acclimate to both of those. They will require a little bit more water, the more sun that they're in, but they will take sun, and they will also take full shade. And again, this is another fern that's going to spread like wildfire. I also want to point out that we have such a large growing native enthusiast market with our customers, that there's a lot of growers that are following suit. So this plant right here features the American Beauties marketing, which not only advertises it on the container, but they also include these really nice large tags. So when you're shopping, you can see that a lot of the growers are starting to promote the natives that we're selling. Also on our grounds at Merrifield Garden Center, you can look for these signs. This will indicate right above the plant that this is going to be your native plant species. Most of them will have a little red tag to them, or red sticker if it's a Nova, Northern Virginia native. You're also going to have those stickers on the plant signs themselves, but all the plants I'm going to show you today are either going to be native to Virginia or neighboring areas. So there's a few that are native to North Carolina or Tennessee, but none of them are going to be not native to North America. And then another fern, which I have been experimenting with this is Adiantum pedatum, or our maidenhair fern. Maidenhair ferns are stunning. They can be a little bit tricky to establish, but again, if you're going for that wild look and you want some texture mixed in with your native garden, this is a fabulous, gorgeous fern, and they've got these really nice dark stems to them. So when I say they can be a little difficult to establish, they want medium moisture. So you don't want them in a soggy condition. They'll root rot really easily, but you also don't want them to dry out. They'll kind of shrivel up on you.
We have a question, Caitlin, about the ferns.
Yes.
So when you're planting the ferns in containers, do you usually leave them out for winter? Is the first question. The second question is, do you need to water them if they go like dormant?
So it's important to pay attention to the rain when you leave your plants out. Since these are all perennials, I would not bring them inside, because doing that, you're going to throw off that life cycle I had mentioned earlier with bloom schedules. So perennials want to go dormant. They want their nap. They want to be able to rest during the winter, but we also don't want to neglect them, whether it's in the ground or containers. If we get a really big dry spell, then it's really important to water them. So a little rain gauge on your deck or patio that you can keep track of how much rain you're getting throughout the months of December and January, February. It's important to keep up with the watering. So I probably check my containers outside maybe twice a month just to keep up with them. I have had luck with some of the more cost-effective plastic pots, but my recommendation and the plants that do the best for me are the ones that I put in our frost-resistant ceramic pots. You never want to do terracotta, because terracotta in the cold with water, it's going to crack. So you can't let that completely dry out because there's a living plant in it. Terracotta gets wet and expands with the cold. You're going to have a broken pot and a really exposed root ball at that point. So no terracotta, but you can leave them outside in a nice frost resistant container. All right, now since we're talking about ferns, now this is the lady fern. You could see how I got it a little switched up doing a quick grab with the hay scented. They're both very delicate and beautiful, but completely different genus. So your lady ferns, unlike the hay scented fern, will tolerate more moisture. They can take some sun, but you're going to really have to keep up with those water levels. But if you have that area that is shaded and has a lot of moisture, like I have this corner with a downspout in my garden, this is the plant I have planted right under that downspout. It's about 2 feet tall, and I absolutely love it because it's just so delicate and pretty, and I have it mixed in with a couple other things with broader textures. But this is a rock star fern. They can be a little bit aggressive. So like our hay scented, like the sensitive fern, your lady ferns will spread. So if you want something that's going to triple or quadruple in one season, this is your girl. Another fairly aggressive fern that wants its moisture. This is the Thalictris palustris, or your marsh fern. So we have Japanese beach ferns that are not native. This is the same genus. And what both Thalictris have in common is they can tolerate wet soils. In fact, they thrive in them. So Thalictris palustris, another fabulous fern that will also spread on you. So make sure you have a nice space for it, or if it's in a container, definitely keep up with that watering. And speaking of downspouts and wet areas in the garden, this is Carex laxicolmus. So I showed you the Pennsylvatica earlier, that's more drought tolerant. Again, don't let it get too dry. But this Carex is going to be evergreen. It's got fairly broad leaves. And again, it will get its inflorescence in the spring. Mine was fairly evergreen throughout most of the winter. So Carex laxicolmus gets a huge points in my book because it looks gorgeous. It does get this like more silvery blue, sagey colored foliage to it. And it's a rock star, held up for most of the winter for me. It may take some folks a season or two for the plant to get established to really maintain its evergreen status. But this one really rocks out in my garden. I have it right next to my lady fern. Where is she? And then I do have another fern that we very seldomly see in our stores. They're just starting to produce it a little bit more. It's called a hart's tongue fern. I suggest you look it up, and when we do carry it and you see it in the stores, grab it immediately. That is a native fern that's endangered in New York State, and it's too cool. Trust me, look it up. It's got really broad fronds, and then its spores, which is how ferns reproduce, go across the plant like horizontally with stripes.
What is the name of that fern again?
Hart's tongue, Harts. And I have been nagging every single one of our growers to
working on trying to get it.
Yes, we want more of the Hart's tongue fern because it's probably my favorite of the ferns, and we should sell more of them. But again, these guys are a great combo mixed with a Hart's tongue fern if you've got wet soil and less sun.
I do have a question for you that is unrelated, but we have the two big old grassy plants behind you. What are they called? We have a request to know the names of those.
So all of this behind me is going to come to the foreground.
Okay.
I'm just going to whiz through the last two of our shade plants, and then we will get to our sun stuff, which I'm really excited about.
Alrighty. Yes.
Pollinators are on my brain. Most of the stuff behind me supports our pollinators, and they're just, I love summer and perennial gardens. Speaking of pollinators, I've got two more to show you for our shade groups and can tolerate more moist soil. This right here is Cleone leonii. So the white turtle head is native to Virginia. This is native to North America. And the tiny Tortuga cultivar that I have with me gets these pink flowers to it late summer, early fall. It's also really cool to watch the bees try to access the flower for its nectar, because these guys look almost like little snapdragons with very closed mouths. So again, Cleone leonii is going to be a great native for a shade garden. It does need a little bit of sunlight, so 2 to 3 hours will go a long way, and it will tolerate moist soils. The same is true for Lobelia cardinalis. So Lobelia syphilitica that I had shown you earlier will get blue flowers like this, only more compact. And this is a fabulous plant for hummingbirds. I have one of these in a container. It's by itself, so it can really take off and get some space and expand. And I have hummingbirds visiting my garden just for this plant right here. I'm pretty sure this draws it in more than the hummingbird feeder that we have. So Lobelia cardinalis, the straight species will get to be 3 to 4 feet tall. If it's not in enough sun, you will have to stake it. Mine gets about 4 hours of morning sun, plenty of water, and it doesn't need any staking. So Lobelia cardinalis is one of my top favorites for moist part sun locations, especially for our hummingbird fans. Now we're going to transition more to the sun perennials. Since we're talking about hummingbirds, the first section of sun perennials that I will show you are going to be for more drought tolerant. This right here is hummingbird mint. So this is Agastache rupestris. Rupestris is native to the southern parts of North America. So you'll see them throughout Arizona and New Mexico. They're very long blooming perennials. This cultivar right here is cultivar rosy posy, which is one of the hardiest. So it can tolerate hardiness zones as cold as zone 5. We're zone 7, south of us would be zones 8, zone 9. So Agastache or hummingbird mint is fabulous. It smells like licorice. The rosy posy will get to be about 2 feet. And if you're good about deadheading it, it's going to be a repeat bloomer for you. And it is one of the hummingbird's favorites. You'll also see bees and butterflies on this. Now, since we were talking about containers, I've made a lot of native pot containers this year. This is going to be one to attract pollinators with natives throughout the summer. So we've got Agastache, which is going to be a long bloomer. Right there, we've got our little pollinator sanctuary sign. Then I've got Asclepias tuberosa. So Asclepias is going to be the host plant for monarch butterflies. We've got a bunch of Asclepias here today that I'm going to show you, but there are 25 native species in this area, so we're just going to stick to the top few. Tuberosa gets a lot of points in my book because it gets to be about 2 feet tall. It's drought tolerant. You'll see bees all over its gorgeous orange flowers. There's also a cultivar called Hello Yellow. Again, it will be a host to the monarch butterflies, just a different flower color. And then I've got another host plant. So common checkered skippers are attracted to this lovely here. This is in the mallow family. This is sorry, I'm working with the camera. This is Calarahoe in Convallaria. So another host plant. And the reason I have this in this container is it spills. It can look a little crazy. They do act as a fabulous ground cover in your yard, but this is going to be an early summer blooming perennial that's a host plant and native. And common name for them is wine cups, which is pretty self-evident, you can tell. And I have another early summer bloomer. This is Ornithera reticosa. So Ornithera is a pollinator specialist favorite. You will see tons of native bees on these. They will naturalize. So if you have a sunny area with not a lot of water, this is going to be a good plant for you. And all 4 of these are going to be great in this container. They might get a little crowded by next year because I definitely packed them in, but they're going to be great companion planting because they're drought tolerant. The same is going to be true for the next few plants I showed you. Okay, so Monarda, or our bee bombs, and they're definitely the bomb. There are some Monardas like Fistulosa and Didmias that are going to want a little bit more water. The ones that are going to be more tolerant of drought conditions would include this girl, so cool. This is Monarda punctata. So this Monarda is more drought tolerant. The flowers aren't as showy as some of the reds that you'll see on the Jacob Kleins. Actually, let's get you real close because they have like little freckles. Can you see those? Well, they're worth purchasing and getting a close look at because they have little freckles on the flowers and the bees go gaga for them. So Monarda punctata is a way to incorporate bee balm that's going to attract a variety of pollinators and as well as birds. Birds go nuts for these seed heads. So Monarda punctata, drought tolerant. Now another one, this is fairly new to the scene because we've had such a growing increase in interest with native plants. This is Monarda bradburya. Let me double check. Bradburiana. This cultivar is midnight oil. So the reason it's called midnight oil, you can see it's just starting to get dark on the leaves here. It will get much darker as the season progresses, and then it will get the similar flowers to punctata. They're going to be a pale purple. So great pollinator plant. It stays around 1.5 feet, 2 feet max. So this is going to be a wonderful bee balm that you don't have to keep up with the watering as much as you do with some of the taller Fistulosas and Didmias. All right, And we can't talk about summer and fall native plantings without incorporating our asters. There are, again, just like the Monardas, tons of species of asters. Today I have brought Aster Purple Dome. She's just starting to show her blooms a little bit early. So Aster Purple Dome, this is Aster novi angli. The asters recently, they've changed a lot of their genus name to Symphytotrichum, but as far as I'm concerned, they're both synonymous with the same aster as well as Symphytotrichum. Regardless, this is going to be a fabulous plant. It'll get around 1.5 feet tall. They will rebloom if you cut them back. They'll also be a little bit more dense and less leggy. It's a little late in the game to be doing that because most of your asters should be showing buds. But if you cut them back or cut them down in May, that'll encourage a thicker, more robust plant and thicker blooms.
I missed a bee balm question, Caitlin. Speaking of deadheading, should you deadhead bee balm and will it rebloom, or does it depend maybe on the cultivar, or what's your thoughts on that?
So I have had, it's not like the most aggressive rebloomer when you cut them back. What I do, especially with my taller bee balms, when they go to seed, is I'll remove the entire stem. The reason for that is bee balm can be prone to powdery mildew. So if I have a bunch of really nice flowers on my tall stack of Monarda, I'll take down the ones that have gone to seed head to hopefully encourage more blooms. With the shorter Monardas, I will deadhead them one by one, and I'll show you a shorter Monarda in a moment, just because that will encourage more blooms within that same time frame, but I haven't gotten them to like flush out again and rebloom like some others. So clean them up, leave some seed heads towards the end of the game. That way you're providing seed heads for the birds. But again, I just clean mine up to remove the seed heads, hopefully encourage more blooms, as well as thin out the stalks of it to hopefully reduce powdery mildew. Okay, now another drought tolerant and full sun. This is Penstemon smallii. Most of us are familiar with Penstemon digitalis, cultivars like our Huskers red penstemons that get white flowers in early summer. Smallii, and this is a straight species, get these really pretty purple flowers to them. This is another one that I'll see the hummingbirds hitting on in my own yard. And it is a fabulous plant that won't get too aggressive. Some of the others will spread by seed. This one will be more massing. And let's see. Okay, grab two here. So this one is an ironweed. Vernonia novabonarensis is going to be your 4 to 6 foot tall ironweeds that are native to Virginia. This one is native closer to Oklahoma. It stays around 2 feet. So if you want something that's going to be a little bit more drought tolerant, a little more compact, as well as have this really nice threadleaf foliage, it's going to be Vernonia lettermanii. At any rate, all of the Vernonias, the ironweeds, are going to be a great late season bloomer, and you'll see tons of birds feeding on those seed heads as well. Now,
I may have missed this, and I apologize. Again, I've been answering emails, helping people get logged in. Have you talked about dry shade natives, or will you?
I did at the very beginning.
Okay, got it.
So for dry shade natives, I'll be real quick so that we
Thank you for those who missed the very beginning.
Yeah.
Quick list. And just so everybody knows who's logged in, because I'm still watching people join. And it's awesome. We actually got a lot of people on here, which is great. Sorry again. We will be sending out notes following the class with Caitlin's plant list. And she has divided it by sun, drought tolerant, shade. So all that's going to be coming up.
Shade thirsty, shade drought tolerant, and then same with sun. And I didn't go too crazy on the shade stuff this week or this time because Louis Ratchford on the 30th will be hosting a class, and I did mention that he'll be doing shade natives at the beginning of this one. So there'll be a live class at our Fair Oaks location. So apologies for breezing through these guys. But for those that missed it, one of my favorite, more drought tolerant shade natives is going to be this one right here, our sensitive fern. It can be a little bit of a thug and spread out, take over a garden, it'll bully others. But if you have the space where you want bang for your buck and you can want something that's going to spread, this is going to be the plant for you, Onoclea sensibilis or our sensitive ferns. Another one that I had shown earlier was Densitatia, or our hay-scented ferns. So similar to the sensitive fern, it's going to spread. The Densitatia will tolerate sun though, unlike your sensitive fern. So this one will tolerate sun, it will spread in shade, it's going to be very drought tolerant. And then kind of mid-level moisture was Adianum and Pedatum. I had also shown several coral bells or heucheras. Let me get those. Where are they? Okay. So real quick. There we go. So this is Heuchera villosa autumn bride. It's going to be a late bloomer and drought tolerant, not as evergreen or semi-evergreen as Heuchera americana. This is green spice. So this is going to be another really good recommendation. It's a little shorter than the autumn bride, but it's got a lot more flashier foliage, which will persist into the colder months. It will also act as semi-evergreen once it's established. And you can't go wrong with your Eastern Star or Aster diviricatus. So these are just starting to show some of their blooms. You can see that at the top. Low growing, drought resistant, native, and they will self-seed, which is fabulous. It's also easy to control if you see them pop up in areas where you don't want them. So back to our sun, more drought tolerant plants. This one's going to be kind of in the middle level of water needs. So you don't want it to get too dried out, but it will root rot quicker than it will wilt and not recover. This is Spigelia marilandica. We're getting towards the end of its blooming season. The one that I have in my pollinator garden probably doubled in size each year. So it's a nice mounding plant. It is another fabulous plant to attract hummingbirds, and it is native to Virginia. And it's really nice if you're someone who's been doing the native gardening and you haven't gotten one of these yet, they're just blowing up. I think our location at Gallows Road sold about 1,000 of these this summer. So the natives are blowing up. Spigelia is the hot girl of the season. She's getting all the attention. So Spigelias are going to be easy to establish. They're more drought tolerant, but you don't want to let them get too dry. And again, they establish really easily. Put her right there. Okay, grasses. So we did have a question about the grasses earlier. I've got two drought resistant grasses here. This first one, this is a little blue stem. This is big blue stem. Different genus. So this is Schizocarium. It will get to be anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. Gorgeous, gorgeous sagey foliage. The cultivar standing ovation gets very purple in its blades, and then it's just starting to go into inflorescence. These are not going to be like those foxtail grasses. They're very fine and delicate, but you will see birds feeding on those seed heads. And you'll also see there are some pollinators that will go to those seed heads and harvest nectar. I didn't know that up until like a year ago doing research. But Schizocarium, little blue stem, going to be drought resistant and a fabulous native grass. I see these all over by my house growing throughout the meadows. Now, big sister here, this is Andrea Pogon, or Rain Dance is the cultivar name. This can get anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. Also just starting to show its inflorescence. So these inflorescence are starting to develop at the top. I'll get this a little closer. And Rain Dance gets this really cool deep purple color to it. Is that showing?
A little bit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see now.
Give them a week and they'll open up. So those are our two threw me off there. These are our sun drought resistant grasses. Little blue stem, big blue stem. And then the last one, oh, I lied, 2 more. I've got Muhlenbergia capillaris here. So Muhlenbergia capillaris is extremely popular when it's in inflorescence. So these are going to be late summer, early fall. They will show inflorescence that's going to look like a pink afro. The capillaris, Muhlenbergia capillaris, the straight species is the pink afro. There's also a really nice cultivar called White Cloud. drought tolerant, very delicate, and this is a little bit more flowy than the blue stems I had shown you. Now, aragrostis is another grass. This is a similar inflorescence to the Mullenbergia. Mullenbergia just tends to be a lot thicker. I'm not kidding when I say it looks like a pink afro. Aragrostis is nice because it comes into its inflorescence earlier in the summer. It's got beautiful little purple seed heads to it, and it's shorter in stature. So if you want a grass for a smaller space, this is a wonderful thing to incorporate. And again, you're going to have gorgeous foliage and really fun seed heads. So 4 native grasses for a sunny spot that's more drought tolerant. Okay. Now, I showed you earlier the Agastache rupestris. This is Agastache funiculum, cultivar name Blue Fortune. So this is going to be more native to Tennessee, Kansas, and further south. It's hardy in our area. So it's going to get about 2 to 3 feet in size. These lovely, like almost lavender colored little purpley blue flowers are crawling with bees all the time at the garden center, and the butterflies love them as well. So it's a great long blooming nectar source. Did you have a question, Sally?
I did. I've never heard this before, so I have to ask you. For the Muhlenbergia, that's called muley grass, right?
Yes.
Okay, here's the question. Is it also called purple love grass? I've never heard of that.
So purple love grass is the aragrostis that I showed you.
Okay, that's the other one.
So this is our purple love grass. Apologies for skipping on some of the common names, guys.
No, there's so many for some of them.
There are. So I'm very good with my scientific, not as much with the common names, and I should remember to tell you guys them. This is what's called the purple love grass.
Okay.
The Mullenbergia capillaris, that's your muley grass.
Muley grass. Okay, got it. Thank you. I was gonna get, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I had to ask about that one. I was not sure. I know the other one looks like pink cotton candy. That's how I always think of it.
Yes, pink cotton candy or pink afros, my interpretation. All right, so Agastache funiculum, a little bit more native and closer to our range as far as being a North American native, not Virginia, but I do think it deserves a place in your native garden, especially if you're gaga for pollinators. And very similar to Agastache rupestris, it's got a really cool smelling foliage to it. It's minty, it's licoricey. The flowers, if you save them, they dry really well, which is always pretty, and they're fragrant, and it will not spread as aggressively as other mints. And I mean that, that's not just saying it. Like most mints will take off and take over the garden. These guys stick to their mound. So if you want a mint that's easy to grow, that wants sun, drought tolerant, it's Agastaches for me are like coral bells. I can't
But some of the fragrance of mint, but it's like better behaved.
Yes, so it's going to give you that fragrance, which means it may even deter mosquitoes, because that's what
that.
Yes, exactly. It is edible, but deer are not going to eat it. As far as us eating it, it's super peppery. Like if you think nasturtiums are spicy, this is not something I would just generally be eating outside of the fact that I want to experiment and try it. It wasn't that pleasant in my experience, but deer resistant, as well as all the other fabulous factors with our Agastache. Okay, now we talked about asters. I told you there would be more asters. This is a Stokes aster. That's your common name. It is, however, a different genus altogether. So this is Stokesia laevis. Cultivar name is Peachy's Pick. These are extremely drought tolerant, very low maintenance. They will self-seed, but I have not seen any of the cultivars that we sell, because you'll very, very seldomly see a straight species for sale. I have not seen it grow aggressively. I've had one that's doubled its size every year in the pollinator garden I have. It's got gorgeous showy flowers. This is one of the seed heads right here. So those will drop. It is helpful if you do a little bit of deadheading. The deadheads, which I don't think I have any on this one, will look very hollowed out compared to the new buds that look like this. So they'll stay around 2 feet tall. This is a stunner with some of the more delicate foliaged plants. So mixing the Stokes aster with the container garden I showed you earlier, that's just like, come on. If you want native and pollinators, this is like such a hot mix. Okay, so we'll put her there. Now, goldenrod. Some of our taller goldenrods can be a little bit more aggressive. This one right here is Little Lemon. So this is going to be a shorter goldenrod that's about to start up. So as a shorter plant, it's going to bloom earlier. It's also a little bit more drought tolerant. So this is another favorite, especially for monarch butterflies. They go gaga for these flowers and the seed heads against poor bird populations. But there's a lot of bugs that will go to goldenrod. And don't get it confused with the ragworts and other things that cause fall allergies. Goldenrod is less likely to be irritating your senses than some of the other flowers simultaneously blooming. The same can be true for sneezeweed. So sneezeweed right here gets an awful low rap. And again, it's not that plant that's causing the irritation. This is Helenium autumnalii. They're very late blooming. Pollinators go nuts for them. And this really, really gorgeous orange colored variety, this is cultivar Mariachi Fuego because it's on fire.
Can you repeat the name? I'm sorry, of what was the specific aster, the one that you just showed? Like,
oh, this is
Stokesia.
Cultivar name is Peachy's Pick. Now, most of the cultivars of Stokesia are going to be similar colored blooms. Divinity is going to be white. She's really pretty. Then there's going to be color wheels as well as Mel's Blue. That's a little bit more blue. Most are along the same tone though, but Stokesias are awesome. And
I'm glad I asked. I thought that was aster.
No, Stokesia.
Alrighty.
All right. And then, so again, Helenium, great for a drought resistant garden. They'll get about 2 feet tall. They're supposed to be deer resistant, but we always take that with a grain of salt. And they also make for really nice cut flowers. That's a beautiful cluster of blooms. Okay, now I've got, let's see, a few more here. This is Gaillardia grandiflora. So Gaillardias, or blanket flowers, are really cool. Most often you'll see Arizona Sun, which is going to be a red variety. Since I like to stay out away from the norms, I chose this variety. So the Asclepias tuberosa, or the butterfly weed I first showed you, would make a beautiful companion garden plant with this. It pulls out that orange, a little bit of the yellow. It's very sweet. And when we talk about deadheading, Gaillardias are one that have this really cool lollipop-like shape when they're finishing bloom. You can see this guy's about to drop its petals. Here, give it a little assist. So, and then that ball will even expand further as the seeds develop. If you remove it, even though it's really, really cute, you're going to encourage long blooms with your Gaillardia. Now, Gaillardias really, really like well-draining soil. They don't want soggy feet. They will occasionally dry out in our heat, so they're great if there's a sun location where it's just morning sun. But when they dry out, you'll see the leaves kind of start to droop and go down like that. A quick water, Gaillardias usually bounce back. And it's another one that the pollinators can't get enough of. Let's see, running tight on space. Okay, I had already shown you the Ornithera reticosa in that pot. Here is another example of it. So it will get to be about 1.5 feet tall. This one's just starting to bloom and get a little bit crazy. If you don't have them in enough sun, they will get a little floppy. But Ornithera reticosa, or sundrops, is another common name for them. Okay, now I've got 2 more. First one, this is Achillea millefolium, cultivar name. It's part of the Tutti Frutti series. This is Apricot Delight. So the straight species of yarrow is going to be white. Yarrow is a circumboreal native, which means if you follow the equator, it's native to parts of Asia, Europe, as well as North America. It's also got a lot of medicinal qualities to it. I'm not going into those because I'm not liable for whatever you guys do to yourself watching this today. But it's worth a fun read. Just make yourself accountable, not me. I really like these because they provide a nice flat raceme cluster for butterflies to land on, and then there's a bazillion individual flowers for them to feed off of. They also have this gorgeous fern-like foliage. They don't need a lot of fertilizing. More often you will see these guys self-seed. So I have this exact cultivar in my pollinator garden, and it is spreading, but it's not crazy aggressive. So I'm very happy with Achillea millefolium as a pollinator plant. It's going to bloom late spring, early summer. Put her there. Okay, now black-eyed Susans, Rudbeckia fulgidia. Most of those want to grow in more moist conditions. You'll see them on the edge of a marsh or in a meadow. This cultivar, if you have to have Rudbeckia and you're not good about watering, this cultivar, Little Gold Star, is going to do a really good job for you because they stay shorter than 2 feet tall. They also bloom earlier than some of the taller black-eyed Susans or Rudbeckia. So Rudbeckia, Little Gold Star, gives you everything that you would want from a black-eyed Susan, but it's going to be a little bit more compromising with its water needs because it's a shorter cultivar. Again, it's a fulgidia like our straight natives, but just more compact. She can go right there. All right, so since we're talking about, ooh, you know what? I can't skip this one. This is Heliopsis helanthianoides. So Heliopsis, you'll see these all over by like Fredericksburg, growing throughout the wildflower meadows. This is a funky spinner. That's the name of the cultivar because it's got a lot of red in its eye. It is, according to my observations, just as popular with pollinators. But if you're someone who wants native garden, but also something that's going to be wow factor in your yard, this does it. It's great with pollinators. It's easy to establish. It's drought tolerant. It's just short of 2 feet. And we all love sunflowers. This is going to be a false sunflower, but I think she's deserving of being called a better than sunflower. Put her right there. And now I'll go to the other Rudbeckia. So now we're getting into the more moisture tolerating zone.
I'm going to add, actually, while you're getting into this, I've been holding this question because I knew it was going to come up. The question is, are there natives that will grow in heavy clay soil? So I would say some of that too is, I'm assuming, going to be more like moisture, wet tolerant even.
Exactly. The stuff that is growing in heavier clay is going to be the stuff that tolerates a little bit more moisture. Clay particles are a lot finer than silt and loam particles in our clay or sands, so they don't drain as well. That doesn't mean that you don't want to water them. I also like to get my plants really established before they get to the clay, so they're just a little bit tougher. So what I'll do is I'll dig a hole and I'll do a little bit of Virginia fine mulch with the Merrifield planting mix so that the plants get established in the clay, and by the time they reach it, they're ready to fight. Rudbeckias, the black-eyed Susans, are a great example of something that tolerates clay because they're known for having these really thick, tough roots that can push through the clay. So not only are they going to do well in clay, but they're also going to improve your soil profile as they break it up and add more oxygen, and it's just a healthier soil ecosystem. And I will also point out, since we're getting into clay, this plant right here, which isn't showing off too much, but she's really worth a mention. She's got just a bud right there. This is Veronicastrum. So for all of our fans that like Veronicas, the Veronicas are not native to Virginia, but Veronicastrum virginicatum, or cultivar's root is the common name. These will get fairly tall. This is I believe it's red arrow. Yep, red arrow. So this gets to be about 4 to 6 feet tall with these gorgeous Veronica-like spikes. This plant will tolerate moisture, she will take sun, and she will fight through that clay and establish herself really well. So this is a great way to have everything you would want, especially if you're looking for some height in your garden and you want to battle with the clay soil. So Veronic Hastrom. All right, now I had mentioned Rudbeckias taking on the clay. Oh, look at this. This is Rudbeckia fulgidia, probably the most common cultivar, Goldstrom. So Goldstroms, you can always tell by their broader, thicker leaves. They also have these fat black-eyed Susan flowers to them. So this will take more moisture than the little gold star. So if you have an area, especially if you're looking to establish like a rain garden, that's going to help mitigate the water runoff as well. So again, rain gardens are not bogs. Let's be honest about that one. But this is great for a rain garden, and it will take on clay. It will tolerate more moisture. If you put it in it with the drought resistant plants I showed you earlier, that might not be as simpatico. Okay. Gosh, she's a beast. She gets to go back here. Another good rain garden plant is Liatris spicata. So Liatris is a fabulous native. This is the straight species. One of the more common cultivars is cobalt. There's also Florestein white. And then there's a bunch of other species of Liatris like microphylla that are short. And then there's some other monsters like linguistylis that get 6 feet tall. This one will stay between 2 to 3 feet. It can be drought tolerant once it's established, but they're fabulous for a rain garden because they're robust. So they'll soak up water, and then you'll have more of a dry space if you're not actively watering, and they're tolerant of that as well. Liatris spicata can also be prone to powdery mildew. So this is one that you want to give it 1.5 to 2 feet width space when planting, so there's plenty of airflow. And this is a really fun one to watch your pollinators on because it's just a bazillion little flowers on it that the bugs will crawl all over. And it's a stunning showcase piece in any native garden. If you're a native gardener and you don't have Liatris, it's time to go get one. All right. Oh, so I do want to point out, before I point out the Monarda, that I did bring echinaceas with me today. And this is just a pause on this. This one I was going to showcase you for the more drought tolerant garden bed, where this one may be a little bit more accepting. Again, you're not going to put this in wet soils. These are both cultivars of Echinacea purpurea. Echinacea purpurea, the straight species, will get over 3 feet tall. They can get a little leggy. So if you have a nice wildflower, wild meadow going, then purpurea would be great to incorporate because you'll see it through the grasses and it's beautiful. If you have a smaller garden bed, or if you're looking to fill in a height need, echinaceas come in a bazillion colors and a bazillion heights. There was a Penn State study for over the course of like 3 years that showed that 50% of the time the natives were preferred the straight species. That means the other 50% of the time you had cultivars that were really popular. Also, the Mount Cuba Center did a study, as well as the University of Vermont, and all of them had shown that a lot of the cultivars of Echinacea are just as popular as the straight species with our pollinators. Now, this one is going to be a little bit more drought tolerant than the one on this side. This is Prima Ginger, so I am very biased and very into her. She starts off orange and then fades to this really gorgeous pink color as the flowers mature. So Prima Ginger stays below 2 feet tall, and due to its genetics and its height, it's going to be more drought tolerant than others. So your taller echinaceas never want to be soggy either, but they will have more water needs.
I do have a question. I noticed because I was looking through your notes when I was getting the handout ready, and it said that there was one type of coneflower that wasn't as popular with the pollinators.
So I have one of those.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes. This is Giddy Pink. She's beautiful. She is. That's just like, and kudos, hats off to scientists and all the folks making the cultivars that look like candy pretty much. That's a beautiful flower, but that's just like way too much going on there for our pollinators to access the nectar sources. So I've seen bees on these, not nearly as much as the others. And I have a bunch of photos I can share with you, Sally. I
Okay.
took photos of bees on all of the different echinacea flavors.
But not that one. Or just, yeah. They're so cute. They look like pom-poms, but that's definitely good for people to remember if they want.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. I was like saving her for the end, but I'm down for it. They're pretty, but they're just not a pollinator's best friend. This one gives you that nice hot pink. This is my favorite of the season. Every year I think I pick another, although maybe this one's the favorite. Every year I pick another echinacea that I love, and I'm all about incorporating them in the same bed. So it's just a rainbow of cone flowers because I can't choose. This is Dark Shadows Wicked. Dark Shadows Wicked is a hybrid of Echinacea purpurea as well as Echinacea tennesseeanensis. Echinacea tennesseeanensis is native. It grows in the glades outside of Nashville, Tennessee. It's an endangered plant, and it will hybridize very easily if there's other echinaceas in the area. So as tennesseeanensis only gets to be about 1.5 to 2 feet tall and it grows in glades, that means it's going to be a little bit more moisture tolerant than some of the other echinaceas. Like Paletas, I definitely would not put Echinacea pallida in a more moist environment. But this guy, again, don't drown it, don't put it in a bog, but it's going to be more forgiving than some of the other coneflowers if you're putting it in a more moist location. And because of its height, it's going to be on the outskirts of probably your problem area. Where you have a really moist location, that's where you put the big ones, the big plants that are going to be super thirsty. And an example of that is, hibiscus. Stop. Look at this. So hibiscus mosquitos, I've got these growing all over by the lake at my house. You'll see bees, butterflies, and even hummingbirds. I haven't seen hummingbirds on them myself, but that's what everything I read said. Possibly it's because there's pollinating beetles going after this, that the hummingbirds are chasing after to eat. And there are specialist bees. The sunflower bumblebee, Bombiforus, goes after these guys. And what it'll do is it'll swirl around the center, collecting all of the pollen, and then it makes a little ball that it leaves for its larva. So it's kind of like mom packing lunch for the kids. So hibiscus mosquitos will grow in those moist conditions. You have to have 6 hours of sun, and then you're going to be rewarded with a ton of gorgeous, massive dinner plate sized blooms. They only last, each individual flower only lasts for about a day, and then it'll reveal this seed head. I remove the seed heads. I also remove the spent flowers because they can get a little sloppy. But once that happens, you always have more buds because these will get 3 to 4 feet. Some of them will, in the wild, they'll get about 6 feet, but 3 to 4 feet is about the average of what we're seeing with a lot of the hibiscus cultivars. So this one I believe is ballet slippers. It's beautiful with a light pink and a red eye.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm going to jump in real quick. If you're okay, we'll keep going for a few more minutes since we have to start right.
No.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know because we're at 104. So I just want to let everybody know who missed. I just sent out a chat, but if you have to leave, we are recording. Our email system will send out an email. It's me, but it's through our event system. It goes to everybody who signed up for the class. So we will send that out tomorrow. If you don't get it, please feel free to hit reply on one of your confirmation emails, and I will personally send you the recording. I just have to try and first to send it out to the full group because there's usually a couple hundred of you. So I will do that tomorrow. So anybody who has to leave, please feel free to duck out. And Caitlin, if we can keep going for a few minutes, that's great. And I know you've got to get back to your store location soon, so we won't keep you all day. We probably could, but
I am just loving showing all of the plants.
Oh, and that's speaking of, that was my next question. We had a few questions come in about the echinacea. So people have issues with some of their coneflowers sprawling over and like flopping. What do you do about that? Or are there certain cultivars that are more prone to that? Like what's
so the shorter cultivars shouldn't need as much staking. Some of the tall ones, they might need it. It helps if you have sturdier plants surrounding them that can kind of hold them up. If you don't want to do staking, staking helps. I would also assess how much sunlight you're getting in that location, because if you're getting less light, a lot of things in our garden will flop if they're getting too little light. Another thing that can cause echinaceas to be floppy is if we overfeed them too early in the spring. Obviously, we want to feed them something very high in phosphorus so that we're getting more blooms, but too much nitrogen early in spring, you can get a leggy plant that's going to rock it off, and then they're going to be a little bit more flimsy. So keep that in mind with your echinaceas. Now I'm going to breeze through since we're over time. I know we started late, but I mentioned the Asclepias earlier, the butterfly weed. This is your swamp milkweed and your white swamp milkweed. Oh my gosh. So your white swamp milkweed is short. She'll stay about a foot tall. Again, it's a host plant for monarch butterflies. And then if you don't want something short and delicate and gorgeous like this one, you're crazy. But there's an option for you. There is Asclepias incarnata, or swamp milkweed. She gets these stunning pink flowers, and she'll get about 3 to 4 feet tall. Now, what you may observe this time of year, in addition to seeing monarch caterpillars feeding on these, you'll also often see aphids, as well as the Asclepias beetle. So the aphids aren't going to kill your plant. If you go after the aphids with a chemical, you're going to hurt the caterpillars that are also feeding on this foliage. So the solution, you blast those aphids with a hose. You look for the caterpillars first, so you're not blasting them off. You can also manually remove aphids. And then the Asclepias beetle, I've never seen them do anything other than mating on Asclepias. And then they spread the seed heads when they start to develop like a big cone on the mature plants. So those little Asclepias beetles, I'm fairly certain that their role is to spread Asclepias throughout, which will happen with a lot of Asclepias. They will self-seed and spread, most often with Asclepias syringia. That's your broadleaf milkweed. That spreads like a gangster. The incarnatas will spread, not as aggressive as syringia, but they will. Perennials is a little bit more controlled and less aggressive. So you've got some height, you've got the shorty, both will tolerate moist conditions. And I've got right here, this is Verbena hastata, or blue vervain. So most of us don't associate with verbenas with moisture. This one will grow in a sunny swamp location. So if you've got a wet spot in your yard, this is your girl. She's gonna get about 4 feet tall, tons of pretty little purple flowers in clusters that pollinators go nuts for. So this is one of my favorites. If you're growing in a moist condition, this mixed with this is just like, they will take all that water and they will grow just fine. Another member to add to the mix. So in our last video, I did show you guys Picanthamum muticum. Penn State listed that as its #1 pollinator plant. That is your mountain mint. This is American mountain mint. This is Picanthamum virginigatum. So native to Virginia, it grows in more moist conditions, and it is not the showiest thing, but I kind of appreciate the white silvery flowers to it. I do not appreciate it as much as pollinators do. This is a fabulous mint. Unlike your agastache, it will spread like a mint. So keep that in mind with this plant. All right, cruising. Helianthus. This is a short variety. This is autumn gold. It gets to be about 1.5 to 2 feet tall. Gorgeous sunflower-like flowers. This is one of the latest bloomers in your perennial beds. Full sun, well draining. But if you love this sunflower and you want something more, you want height, okay, check out this one. This is Helianthus lemon queen. This Helianthus will get to be 4 to 6 feet tall. So you have your choice of these sunflower-like plants, whether it's dry with the Heliopsis or moist conditions with your Helianthus. Gorgeous, gorgeous. And moisture, you can't not show Joe Pye. So Joe Pies are just starting to show off. Swallowtails go nuts for them. This is another example of a hot native being advertised as a hot native. This cultivar is Little Joe. So your eupatorium, now eutriphiums, they're changing the name on that one too. Your eupatorium, purpureum and maculatum's get to be about 6 feet tall. This variety stays around 3 feet tall. This is a species called dubium. So eupatorium, dubium, Little Joe, going to be a little bit more compact, but still attract just as many pollinators, and your Joe pies will be more water tolerant. And I talked about pollinator preferences between natives and straight species. This is Phlox paniculata Gianna. So Phlox paniculata is the straight native. Gianna, or Gina, was naturally occurring in the wild, and they have cultivated it. So it's readily available to us. According to studies, this got 7 times more pollinators to it than the straight species. It's also fabulous because it's this brilliant pinky purple color and a bazillion little flowers to it. So each individual flower is a little bit smaller than what you mostly see with our Phlox paniculatas. This adds more nectar for our bugs to visit. And then I've got Physostesia, or obedient plant. She's not obedient at all. She will spread like a gangster. This one right here is Crystal Peak. And when I say gangster, I mean it will beat up and take over where the other plants are in your garden. If you have an area that you want to naturalize and it's got moist conditions, Physostesia will do just fine. Physostesias, this is Crystal Peaks, so it's a white cultivar. There's also one called Miss Manners, that's pink, and the native variety is a pale pink. This is popular with the bees. They'll climb up into these little flowers, as well as hummingbirds. It draws in a ton of pollinators, and it's something that will naturalize. So again, if you're doing native and you want to go nuts with a meadow, this is your plant.
Caitlin, can you, just off the top of your head, are any of these like wet area tolerant plants? Are they deer resistant?
Most of them are.
Most of them? Okay.
Yeah, I think the phlox, I've had people report that they've had issues with them getting munched on.
Okay.
This one definitely going to be deer resistant. The hibiscus is going to be deer resistant. I mean, we can eat, these are not the hibiscus that you use for tea making. That's a different species and grows in a different continent. Apparently you can eat the petals. I wouldn't, because I eat plenty of flower petals in my experimenting, and they taste like paper. This one's going to be more
It
flesh.
tastes like you would expect flower petals to taste, I would assume.
They're not. I mean, it's fun to say that you're eating flower petals, but it's just, I don't want to eat this one. It's like a steak. So if you have very aggressive deer, they might graze on the flowers. I have not seen it happen, and I have plenty of deer in my yard, and they haven't done it to mine, but just, you know, food for thought. If we can nibble on it, maybe deer can. Oh, deer resistant. You can also do grasses. So panicum is another good example of a rain garden. So it doesn't want to be soggy all day by any means. It can be drought resistant once it's established, but its massive root system will soak up excess water. So this one right here is heavy metal. She'll get about 3 to 4 feet tall. There's also varieties that turn really hot red colors in the fall. That's going to include your purple tears, your Apache rose, as well as Shenandoah, who's probably the most popular of the cultivars. And for moist conditions, this is Phalaris, strawberries and cream. So this will turn a little pink. You can see here they've got really attractive inflorescence or seed heads to them. These grow from Canada down to Virginia, from Alaska down to Canada. So they are a native. We are in the warmer part of their native zone, so they will absolutely tolerate more moist soils. This cultivar, strawberries and cream, because it's going to turn pink, is just like so pretty with that variegation. You can't go wrong with that. So we've got our grasses, we've got our flowers. I've got 2 more to show you. Boom. So this plant right here, this is another, it's Coreopsis. I didn't bring in the verticillatas as native enthusiasts. We all know our tick seeds. This one's cool because it is a swamp tick seed. So these will grow from, I believe, North Carolina down to Florida, but we're within their hardiness zone. This is summer sunshine. Scientific name is Coreopsis palustris. These will take about 2 to 3 feet in width and about 2 feet wide. They get, again, little small tick seed flowers to them with a brown eye, like a black-eyed Susan, very late blooming, and they will tolerate moisture all day. So fabulous plant for pollinators, and birds like the seed heads on those. And the last is Aronia melancarpa. So we sell a lot of fabulous native shrubs and trees at Merrifield. Very seldom will you see a woody plant in a 1-gallon pot in the perennials department. But bang for buck, this is not a bad deal. For $22, you get a small shrub. Aronia melancarpa, or black chokeberry, has beautiful, like almost like Queen Anne's lace clusters of white flowers in spring. It will get purple to black berries towards the end of summer into fall, and then these leaves turn a beautiful scarlet red. I have put these in native containers because they're just gorgeous, and they have thrived in those, and eventually they get big enough that they go into my yard. This cultivar Viking gets to be 3 to 6 feet. So Aronia melancarpa, she'll tolerate moist conditions, again, not soggy, but this is a fabulous, fabulous plant for pollinators. The birds will eat the fruit and you can enjoy the foliage. Caitlin out.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin. Everybody who joined us, thank you so much for bearing with us during our tech debacle at the beginning. We will be following up tomorrow with the coupon, with the recording, and with Caitlin's list. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us. I love these native plants classes. They're one of my favorites. And it's so fun just hearing you talk about the plants because you have such passion for them. It shows through. Just a couple of notes for you guys before we leave. Louis, we just added a class with Louis Ratchford on Thursday to talk about drought tolerant plants. These are going to be non-natives and natives. So he's passionate about woodland gardening, especially. And so he knows a lot of natives, but he's going to do drought tolerant stuff for us on Thursday. And this Saturday, Paul McLean is teaching a class on hydrangea for anyone who's passionate about hydrangeas. And that's going to be at the Fair Oaks store. So that's in person. So to my 2 announcements, hopefully we'll see a good number of you on Thursday. Don't worry, we will have the link functioning on Thursday. This should be a one-time problem. But thank you all so much and have a great afternoon. Caitlin, thank you. I will see you later.
Bye.
All righty. Bye.